Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Tomorrow. And we're going to talk about some really cool stuff that I'm super excited about today. And Lisa, what are you super excited about today?
Well, if we want humans to become multiplanetary, then we need to test our vehicles. And a human-rated vehicle has just passed a critical milestone.
Ooh.
Find out which one if you stick around.
Excellent. And Space Mike, you've got something to be excited about today. What are you excited about?
Oh yeah, Kim, kind of on the same train of thought there. There has been an announcement that a commercial company is going to be sending a private customer around the moon. Ooh. And on top of that, NASA and JAXA, the Japanese space agency, have signed an agreement to get to the surface of the moon together. So I am so excited to talk about what this means for our future.
And over on our observation lounge, we've got Sarah. Who are you talking to today, Sarah?
I'm talking with Chris Blackerby of Astroscale, and their company is cleaning up space debris, which is really important because of the International Space Station loss of pressure. If that happens again with real space junk, we need to be able to, well, actually, we need to prevent that. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Sounds like a good plan to me. And stay tuned. This is Tomorrow, Orbit 11.36.
Good morning. How's everything up in the sky?
Hey, and welcome back. You just saw us, but now you're back. And in order to get this show started, we're going to throw it over to Space Mike over here for our launch minute, because you've got some stuff to talk about. Some of us are tired, some of us are caffeinated, some of us are just straight up excited about launches today.
Well, before we get to the launch that happened today, let's first do things in chronological order. So,
fair enough.
The first launch that happened over this week was actually a Falcon 9 launch. Oh man, this was a Block 5 launch that launched from Space Launch Complex 40 in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Whew. And this launched on Monday, September 10th at 4:45 Coordinated Universal Time. The payload for this mission was the Telstar 18 Vantage communications satellite, also known as the APStar 5C. It's going to be used by two companies to provide coverage area that'll span from India and Pakistan in the west all the way to Hawaii in the east. So it's providing a pretty wide communications band there. And something that I was just so excited about with this mission was the fact that they had a first stage landing of the Falcon 9 booster on the Atlantic drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. And just always happy to see that. And of course they were able to do a successful mission and deploy their payload successfully. And that is going to a geostationary orbit. This was a geostationary transfer orbit that it placed it into. But this wasn't all. The launch that everyone is so excited about was the Delta II launch, the final launch of the Delta II. And this was actually in the 7420 configuration, meaning it's the 7000 series of the Delta. This particular upgrade has 4 solid rocket boosters, a second stage engine, and a 0 third stage, or no third stage. This launched from Space Launch Complex 2 West at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. And it launched today, Saturday, September 15th at 12:46 Coordinated Universal Time. The payload for this mission was the ICESat-2, which stands for the Ice, Cloud, and Land Elevation Satellite number 2, which is part of NASA's Earth's observation system and is a mission for measuring ice sheet elevation and sea ice, as well as land topography and vegetation characteristics using a laser to do that. And this is going to accomplish its mission with that advanced topographic laser, otherwise known as ATLAS. And congratulations to everyone involved in the launch of that.
Woo! Bang on, Space Mike.
Killing it, right on the timer. That was awesome.
Man, got it down on that. Excellent. So I got to ask you, Mike, what was the most exciting thing that happened with these between these two launches that we had this week?
Well, I mean, just obviously from my personal opinion, the Falcon 9 landing, I'm always happy and excited to see landings. I don't know if I'm still getting as excited as I did the first time that they did it, but oh man, still makes me just jump for joy every time I see that. But seeing the last Delta II launch, I mean, this was all kind of bittersweet, and the Delta rocket has had quite a long history to get here. And just, I believe I have an image here of the evolution of the Delta. It actually started off as an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, and it was called Thor back then. But they made several upgrades and had experimental upper stages so that it could be a satellite booster. And eventually they started adding solid rocket boosters to the side and having better upper stages until they got to the point where they were extending the fuel stage on the first stage and had their own upper stage for this, and it evolved into the Delta II. And the Delta II rocket has been launching since 1989. It's flown 156 times and only failed twice out of all those missions in all the different configurations that it's flown in, and served the United States very well.
Yeah, just a fantastic.
Like I was saying earlier, I'm super jealous of you guys that you got to go and see the launch this morning.
Yeah, that was fun.
So good.
It was really, really great getting out there and getting to watch sort of the swan song for Delta II, and my personally my favorite rocket. Oh yeah, there we all are at the public viewing site. There's all of us out there trying not to be semi-frozen because it is California, so it's like what 53 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 degrees Celsius.
It's pretty cold.
And we're all from California, so that's pretty much freezing to us. So
Well,
hypothermia
some of us are
was
from California.
yeah.
Not all of us.
Yeah, not all of us. Also, do we have more people? Oh my gosh. Oh yes, we met a couple Tomorrow viewers
So
out there.
Adrian, I believe that
Yes.
is your name. So Adrian came up and saw us at the launch because I was tweeting out, and I was like, anyone that recognizes us, that watches the show, come and see us. And yeah, so
Yeah, there we are.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was really great. We met quite a few Tomorrow viewers actually out there. So we're always excited to run into people when we are out there. And just to kind of go back to Delta II a little bit, from Space Vogel in our chat room, kind of throwing down some statistics, which was this was the 100th consecutive successful launch of a Delta II and the 130th consecutive successful launch for United Launch Alliance ULA there, which I believe this makes the Delta II have the longest streak of consecutive successful launches, if I recall correctly, with that there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's really interesting. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if that's true. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think the next closest is the Orion 4, and I think it's got somewhere like in the mid-70s of consecutive successful launches. So it stands sort of on its own out there in the history of it. And Mike, if you could tell us a little bit about the
statistics.
Yeah, big statistics. It was a good call there,
Nice
Mike.
segue.
Speaking of statistics, tell us a little bit about the numbers that we got now, Mike.
Oh man, so just keeping track of all the orbital launches for this year. With these two launches of the Falcon 9 and the Delta II, we are neck and neck with China for launches for the year. China has 24 successful orbital launches for the year, and the United States now has 24 successful orbital launches of the year. So it's going to be a close race to see who's going to be the rocket champion of 2018.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Isn't there like a running bet going on somewhere?
There is. Just last week, me and Ben Credible made a dollar bet. I bet that China is going to win this year, even though I hate to bet against my own country. I just have a feeling that they're going to beat us in the number of launches, but it's going to be very close. That's my prediction.
Yeah, we'll see.
Ben was, wherever he is, I believe, was betting for the United States. So.
All right. Well, we'll see who ends up winning that one, and we will let you know, either probably in the first Tomorrow episode of Orbit 12. So we'll take a look at that.
What about you guys? Do you think that there's any possible runner-ups? Do you think that Russia can possibly recover in the rest of the year, or that there'll maybe even be a bunch of launches from India?
I like underdogs, so I'm going to go for New Zealand.
Wonder why. Yes. Yeah, I'm actually with you, Space Mike. I think China's going to top the list at the end of the year. So, yeah, it's so tough to go against their cadence that they have, especially once they get going. And then, of course, there's a couple surprises that come from them all the time as well. So we'll see how that goes. So, and
surprise launches that are going to get us, I think.
I'm pretty happy with the fact that there are multiple countries and consortiums of countries that have launched as well. That's like not something that's been a thing, up until very recently. So it's super exciting to see all of this happening. So really cool stuff.
Is.
Yeah. And now we're going to talk a little bit about launching, but a very specific part of a mission after you launch, because you come back after doing that.
That's right.
So Tell us a little bit about coming back.
Well, in order to get humans to space and become multiplanetary, you know, we're talking about the number of launches that we've had this year for different countries. You know, only the Russians are actually sending humans into space. So that means if we want to go to other planets and become a spacefaring civilization, we're going to need more than just one vehicle taking us to space. So there's a few in development, which is good because the more that we have, the more chances people are going to have to get to space. And a human-rated vehicle just finished testing their parachutes.
All right.
And it was the Orion vehicle. So Orion is being developed by NASA, and we have some beautiful footage here of them testing their parachutes. This test occurred at September 12th at 1500 UTC.
Now, where did this happen at? Because that looks like a really sparse place out there.
Yeah, it's the mythical lands of Arizona. Space Mike's quite familiar with that area. But
Mike, did this land in your backyard?
Not quite, not quite. This was at the U.S. Army's Yuma proving ground, and it's a little ways outside of Phoenix, where I'm based.
Okay, so you couldn't claim it if it landed in your backyard.
Yeah, I didn't see it. No. Otherwise, I would have definitely had salvage rights.
Yeah, I mean, I would have put like a bedroom in there or something. Anyways. How do you do a parachute test, Lisa? Because
Well-
I mean, that looks like they just like chucked it, but I don't know exactly how they chucked
that's
it.
kind of what they did. You know, you could launch it on a rocket and see if it comes back down, but then, you know, what if your parachutes don't work? You're going to break your test article. So what they did is they threw it in the back of a C-17 aircraft, and they attached it to a crate with a lot of different specific sets of parachutes to orientate, stabilize it, and kind of make sure it was like pointing in the correct direction. And they deployed at a certain sequence as well.
So it's using parachutes.
Yep.
What happens if a parachute fails?
Well, luckily, with this Orion parachute test, built into the system is redundancy. So there are 11 parachutes in total, and they deploy in a sequence of 3, 2, 3, 3. The first three are the forward bay covers, so they pull off the heat shield. The next two are like gonna slow down the article. They're the drogue chutes.
Okay.
Then you have 3 pilot chutes that deploy to help pull out the main chutes, and then finally the 3 main parachutes that you guys saw in that video there. And if you lose one drogue chute or one main parachute, the Orion will still be okay. Don't ask me what happens if you lose more than one of either of those things. Maybe that's where propulsive landing might come in handy in the future, but the system passed with flying colors for that specific setup that they have. And they've been doing a bunch of tests. Like, I think SpaceX, you were telling me the other day, like they've been testing the system for a really long time. Do you know
They
how many
really
tests in
have, yeah.
total that they've done?
I know that they've been doing tests out there since at least 2005, because
Wow.
the Orion spacecraft was originally part of the Constellation program that George W. Bush put into place, and then that was canceled in 2000, or rather in 2010. But the Orion capsule survived and has become, you know, the way that human astronauts are going to fly on the Space Launch System and go to hopefully a bunch of exotic places in space and go into deep space. So without counting the parachute tests that were done under the Constellation program, because I'm not exactly sure, since then there have officially been 25 tests that of these parachute tests. And it seemed like every other month they were doing a parachute test. It's been crazy. Obviously it hasn't been that frequent, but it seems like they've been doing a lot more. And I think that they even did individual tests, like of the drogue parachutes and the pilot parachutes, with even smaller mock-ups, or even just like a dummy payload that was in the same shape, but were not the same size, not the full size mock-up with the same amount of weight as the Orion capsule would have, which is what we saw for this final test. That was a full-up test of all 11 parachutes with an Orion capsule that would be around the same amount of weight, even with astronauts and you know, cargo on board. So.
The good thing is that this final test it solidifies the system as they have it works. It's ready to go. Now we just need to get the rest of Orion going so that they can do the exploration mission 1 with Orion on top of the SLS. It's going to go around the moon in 2020. And those parachutes are going to give everybody a soft landing. And here's the kicker. A soft landing is 32 kilometers per hour or 20 miles per hour. That's defined as their soft landing. A successful landing.
Good. So they can even do that with 2 chutes.
Yes.
Okay, very cool. And you know, redundancy, very important. It has happened before where a parachute has failed coming back in. On Apollo 15, they lost a chute, so they only came down under 2 chutes.
It's like riding the ride at Matterhorn at Disneyland. You hurt your back.
Shattered knee peak, as we call it. So
even with Orion, I know that they had 2 failures during these parachute tests out at Yuma, and that was just part of the process. You know, figuring out how. And I think that was done on purpose to figure out how many chutes can we get away with and still land safely. So.
Yeah, very, very cool. So you were talking about exploration mission 2, or 1, I'm sorry, the circumlunar flight. And Mike, you've got like a moon bonanza to talk with us about today. There's a lot coming up. So Mike, roll it away. Let's see what we got to talk about.
Well, first off, the thing that I'm really excited about, and all it is really just a tweet, but a year and a half after announcing plans to send 2 commercial tourists, basically, on a flight around the moon, SpaceX has given us an update as to whether or not that plan would still happen. Originally, the plan was going to be to fly these paying passengers on a Dragon capsule flying on a Falcon Heavy. But the tweet that was announced this week on Thursday is pretty much saying that a passenger, an unnamed passenger, is going to be flying on the big Falcon spaceship, which I'm going to be calling the big lunar spaceship for this particular mission. And oh my gosh, I am so excited about this. I am so excited about this. The commercial SpaceX mission around the moon is still on. A lot of people thought that it was over and that wasn't going to happen. So I'm excited to see it happen. We don't know yet who the passenger or passengers are going to be, and whether or not it's simply going to be a loop around the moon on a free return trajectory like the Apollo 8 style mission, like you mentioned, or whether or not Falcon, the big Falcon spaceship, is going to, do a burn to stay in orbit around the moon, or even attempt a landing. That would be crazy. They won't attempt a landing on this mission, I'm sure, but it makes me wonder if they would have the capability to do it once this mission actually flies. So I am really excited about this. And we don't know when they're going to attempt this mission, but SpaceX is going to be having a live web stream on Monday that we all need to be tuning into, because they're going to be giving updates, I'm sure, about this mission and updates to the big Falcon rocket and the big Falcon spaceship. And I am really excited about that. So be sure to tune into the SpaceX live webcast this Monday to get more information. But with this whole moon bonanza thing that's going on, I also just wanted to talk about how NASA and JAXA have formally signed an agreement to cooperate on the moon. And they're calling it the Collaborative Efforts for Lunar Exploration and Beyond. And NASA has invited Japan to be a part of a lot of their lunar exploration programs, such as the Lunar Gateway. And with the Gateway, they're already going to be providing certain capabilities and certain technologies. They're going to be building a habitation module in cooperation with the European Space Agency. But NASA also has recognized that they could have a lot of capability with their HTV-X, a upgraded version of their HTV vehicle, which flies to the International Space Station, and which will hopefully be seeing the 7th HTV mission flying to the space station in the next couple of days. Hopefully, anyway. There could be a delay on that. But beyond that, the agencies also are looking at the Space Launch System and the Orion capsule, as we were talking about earlier, and how JAXA can provide systems and provide payloads so that they can have a bunch of future missions to the moon. They are looking at their ways that they can get to their future path to the moon, especially looking at robotic spacecraft, landers, and rovers. That's a big part of, aside from the gateway, the components that they would be adding to the gateway. That's the big part of what JAXA wants to be able to contribute and take part in with NASA. So I'm really excited for those possibilities. And now that makes 4. That makes pretty much everyone. That's NASA, the European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, and Roscosmos, who are all going to contribute together for the Lunar Gateway and go to the surface with at least robots, but eventually to have the goal of sending humans there as well. And I'm really excited for all these pieces that are starting to come together.
Yeah, and the Gateway seems like it's just really taken off since the beginning of this year. It seems like it kind of stalled for a while, and then all of a sudden, 6 months ago, just it's got all the momentum behind it.
It really does, and seeing that support from the international community has been really exciting for me too. I mean, the European Space Agency has added a science airlock, and this whole different module that will be able to add extra communications and refueling capability to the station as well. And that was something that we talked about last week with our guests a little bit. They're calling it the E-Spirit module. JAXA, of course, is going to be supplying a bunch of their different hardware, and hopefully we'll be able to have their cargo vehicle, the HTV-X, be able to come there. The Russians are talking about donating several modules to the Gateway, modules that would be that they've already been building for their future low Earth orbit space station, and instead just cancel those plans and contribute these models to the Gateway. Like, they want to have an airlock for astronauts. They also want to have a science airlock, and they also want to have a habitation module that uses expandable technology. So just seeing the response that we've been getting from our International Space Station partners has been really exciting for me, and seeing how all of these different pieces are growing and more capabilities and opportunities are starting to appear. So I'm really excited for this. There's lots of cons to this as well. I've only been talking about the positives to this. So me and Ben are going to be having some sort of debate here soon as to whether or not we should even do this, whether or not we even should build the Gateway.
Yeah, a idea slobber knocker between you two, both just duking it out with everything going on there.
Mike, I'm curious about who you think, like going back to SpaceX, who do you think is the passenger that's going? And that question extends to the chat room and everyone watching on demand too. Have a guess, and we'll see if anyone picked it right. If we find out on Monday, I hope we do. And if you got it right, we might feature you in next show.
I have two theories as to who the passenger can be. One of the passengers might be James Cameron, the film director, because he has previously tried to sign up with Space Adventures for a flight around the moon, a similar flight like this, but with a Soyuz rocket. There was going to be a special module, a special habitation module that was going to be built and attached to a Soyuz and would do a Lunar 8, or an Apollo 8, style flyby around the moon. And James Cameron was the primary customer for that, although Russia didn't really do any work on that habitation module, and the whole thing is just kind of up in the air. The other person who I think might be the customer was Sarah Brightman's backup, a Japanese businessman. Mamoto, I believe, is his last name. So Satoshi Mamoto, I believe, is his name. He has signed up also through Space Adventures to do a tourist flight to the International Space Station, although I don't know why he didn't take over as Sarah Brightman's backup. It might have had to do something with the scheduling for the Soyuz flights anyway, but I have a feeling that it's one of those two people that it might be. Sorry for the long answer.
I'm kind of with you, Mike. It'd be Satoshi Takamatsu with that.
Takamatsu.
There. So, yeah, it's all good.
I don't know.
I know there was like other people were saying that there was another businessman from Japan who was looking at potentially.
Yusuke.
Yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Last name,
if the chat room has it, pop it in there. We'll throw it up so that we can remember that.
Everyone's saying Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, Jeff's just going to take a quick jog.
I don't think it's going to be Bezos. I don't think it's going to be Bezos. Unless it's like a corporate espionage mission or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? We'll find out.
If Bezos is going to go, he's going to go on his own rocket. He's building his own. He can.
Yeah.
Yeah, why wouldn't Elon go on his own rocket?
Didn't he say something like
Probably.
he's not going to fly unless like he's confident SpaceX will be able to continue? Like if, worst case scenario, the rocket like blows up and there's no more Elon. Like, I think he wants to wait until...
Right. Okay, fine. Just wait until everything works well. So, all right.
Safety first.
Yeah, safety first. Very, very important.
Rule 1.
Yes, rule number 1,
dying.
if you know the rules of tomorrow, that's kind of important. So, Lisa, the clock is ticking for a program that we dearly love here at Tomorrow.
Yeah, well, speaking of, BFR and where it's headed to Moon and then to Mars, everyone's kind of talking these days about going to Mars. But if we want to send humans there, then we need to know as much about the Martian environment as we can before we send the people. And so to do that, we sent rovers and orbiters to understand the Martian environment. But one of our poor little rovers, Opportunity, may be on its way out. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to communicate with Opportunity for a while now because there was a giant Martian dust storm, and that's not good for a rover.
Yeah, it's not particularly great.
Yeah.
So.
The dust storm is...
went into safety mode, but...
Sorry, what was that, Space Mike?
Oh, I was just saying, it went into standby mode. It went into safety mode.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
Yes, but
That's
something
right.
we
happened.
haven't been able to
But it
reach
uses solar
contact.
panels to have enough power so that it can run things like the heaters. And the heaters are important for keeping the batteries warm, because if the batteries get too cold, they're not going to have enough power to wake up the little rover once enough dust clears out of the atmosphere and charges those batteries to enough of a level where it can reboot itself and reboot its computers out of that safe mode.
So is like with Curiosity here, is Curiosity at risk at any point?
No, so with Curiosity, it doesn't actually use solar panels. Curiosity used something called a radio thermal isotopic generator, or RTG, and that uses basically nuclear power to generate heat, which generates electricity, which is what it uses for all its electrical systems on board. And the Mars 2020 rover that's going to launch in 2020 is also going to be using an RTG, so it's not going to have those problems. So, fingers crossed. We're not going to have this problem moving forward, but if there's the whole thing of using nuclear stuff on other rovers. But the dust can get pretty bad. Like you guys can see in this image here, it's completely covering the solar panels.
Yeah, this is a previous one from 2007, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and these guys were launched a long time ago, right? So these were launched like back in 2002, 2003. So the solar panel technology back there was not nearly as efficient as it is now. And so you're already using like low efficiency solar panels. They're really old because this mission was supposed to only last 90 days, and yet Opportunity is still going. Sadly, we lost Spirit, the twin rover, quite a few years ago. And now it's covered in dust, so like all the odds are stacked against it right now.
So how do you check to see if a rover is alive? Because if you're like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of miles away, it's not like you could just go there with a rag and dust it off and then you're A-okay and ready to go. How are they going to keep in touch with Opportunity when it finally, if it does actually ping us back?
Yeah, so NASA kind of came up with like this plan where they wanted to have a 45-day window of active listening. And that just means that they're actively pinging the spacecraft, trying to get it to wake up. And if it has woken up, send a return signal. And they're doing that using the Deep Space Network. So here's an image of the Canberra Deep Space Communications Complex giant antenna dish down there. And they're using that to communicate and ping the rover. But, it takes people to operate the signals and to man the operations, but the DSN, is also listening to all other interplanetary spacecraft we have out there. So you can't just keep clogging up the Deep Space Network trying to get to Opportunity. So they have a 45-day window of listening to the rover and trying to get it to wake up, and then they're going to switch to just passive listening to see if it wakes up on its own.
And there's something that's going to happen on Mars, though, coming up that may sort of give Opportunity a little more favor in its odds of waking back up.
Yeah, so the last couple times that Opportunity and Spirit, its twin beforehand, got covered in dust, miraculously, there were dust storms that like spun around and cleaned the dust off the solar panels, and then it was able to generate enough power, and it was totally fine to keep going on its mission. So it's not dust storm season yet. It's going to happen a little later in the Earth year. But hopefully we get a dust storm that comes around and cleans the panels, and Opportunity can wake up again. And the dust is starting to fall out of the atmosphere as well. The dust storm is ending. So there's a measure in the Martian atmosphere of like how dusty it is, and that's a measure called tau. And the tau level was greater than 10 during the storm. But NASA kind of set this threshold of if the level is below 1.5, that's when we're going to start our 45-day listening window. So they took 2 consecutive measurements of 1.5, which means dust was coming out of the atmosphere. That's kind of why they decided to start listening back for Opportunity.
Is there anything us mortals can do about this?
Yeah, well, a lot of people on Twitter and social media have been saying, like, why only a 45-day window for Opportunity? Like, why are you picking an arbitrary day to start counting it? Like, this rover has inspired so many people. Like, we can't just give up on it. So people are kind of showing their support by using the hashtag #WakeUpOppie. So if you kind of want to show your support for the little rover that could as well, you can always tweet that out or leave a comment below as well talking about, why you want this rover to keep on going and why it's important to you. And hopefully we can show NASA that we want this rover to keep going and that we think it's worth the investment.
So wake up, Oppie. We're listening for you.
Fingers crossed, you can do it.
So exceptional people working on that. So great news stories from both of you. And speaking of exceptional people that we have, do you have
Real
something,
quick,
Mike?
I did want to bring things kind of full circle here. Space Vogel actually brought up in the chat room that Opportunity was actually launched on a Delta II, by the way.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Wow.
So there you go, sort of our theme, saying goodbye to things today. That was ominous. All right, so we're going to go and help and thank our escape velocity citizens. These folks have given us $10 or more per episode, and they help make the show happen. Thank you for supporting us here at TMRO. And if you would like to help the shows here at TMRO, head on over to patreon.com/TMRO. See all the cool stuff that you get with that. And we are now going to go into our calendar break. And after that break, we've got Sarah, who's got a super cool interview talking about space debris and how to clean it up. So stay tuned. There's more tomorrow right after this.
Look into her face, determination in her eyes. She won't give up or quit or fall for little fashion lies. Filled with awesome expectation, this girl's a fascination. And nothing in her way will keep her from her destination. 'Cause she's fire walking, she's fire walking. When it's hot, she keeps on moving. Through the heat, keeps on improving. Yeah, she's fire walking, she's fire walking to be free.
All right, welcome back. So I get the opportunity to talk with Chris Blackerby, COO of Astroscale. So we're going to find out, well, what you guys are up to over there. And you are joining us from Japan, right?
That's right, Sarah. How you doing?
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. It's great to be here.
All right. So, all right, let's just jump into this. Astroscale, what are you guys doing?
So Astroscale was founded about 5 years ago by a Japanese IT entrepreneur. And he was out, he had a passion for space. His name is Nobu Okada. And he was kind of looking into what was going on in space. And he went to a lot of these conferences, and he found that people were talking about space debris, space trash, which consists of everything from small specks of paint that fell off of satellites to old defunct satellites or used rocket bodies. And he found that there was a lot of people talking about the issue, but nobody that was really addressing it from a business perspective. So about 5 years ago, he took the jump in and decided to start a company that was focused on the business of cleaning up space. And so that's what we do. We want to take this issue of space debris, which is, we can talk about it, but a very serious issue for basically all of us on Earth, and go apply business case sensibilities to cleaning it up. So it sounds like a crazy idea just because space is a bit of an unregulated area, and it's a bit hard to find that business case. But over the last 5 years, we've successfully raised over $50 million US, and we now have a global team that is focused on solving this issue.
That is awesome. Okay, so what is your job at Astroscale?
So I joined just about a year ago. So
Okay.
I was formerly at NASA. I was with NASA for about 14 years. And I was focused on international partnerships, kind of strategic planning, and relationships for the agency. For then the last 5 years of my time at NASA, I was the NASA attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. So NASA has 3 people who are the representatives, liaisons for NASA overseas. One is in Paris, one is in Moscow, and one is in Tokyo. And I covered NASA relationships with Japan, China, South Korea, Southeast Asia. And I did that for 5 years. And I was meant to go back to the US last summer. And I knew Nobu, the Astroscale CEO, from my time here, and we started talking. And we talked about this opportunity to come on as COO. The company at the time had a little over 20 people, full and part-time. And Nobu was really looking to grow the company. He had just opened an office in the UK and was looking to expand to be more international. And so he brought me on as COO to look at kind of overall management of the company and strategic planning as we try to internationalize. So since that time now, we've grown. The UK office now has about 10 people. We have about 35 people here in Tokyo.
Nobu and some of the other senior folks sit in Singapore. And then we also have a presence in Washington, D.C. with there who's part-time helping us out with business development and space policy. So we've kind of grown from almost doubled in size the last year or so. So we're close to 50 people now globally, and looking at various mission lines. So I'm there to kind of look at the management overall and strategic development of the company.
Wow. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, you said what space junk is. So what technologies are you going to be looking at to bring that debris? Are you going to be bringing it back to Earth? Are you going to be, what way are you going to be bringing it back to Earth, I guess is the question.
Yeah, so it's such a complex issue, the whole idea of space debris. And I should probably start by saying how does it even impact us? And it impacts us in so many ways, this issue of space debris, because the junk in space, the debris in space is just growing more and more. From 1957, before the first satellite was launched, when there was nothing up there, man-made, human-made, till now, when there's hundreds of millions of tiny pieces of debris up to huge pieces of debris that are in space, all of which have the potentiality to impact an active satellite. And we use these active satellites every day. We've used them. I'm up. It's early morning here in Japan, and as you can see, we're already using satellite technology to have this conversation. So without satellites, our lives would be completely different, unrecognizable. We use it for banking, for communications, for disaster monitoring and response, for just understanding the climate. So the orbital environment is almost just like another place on Earth. It is something that we rely on every day, and I think we need to shift our mindset to say, the orbital environment is something that we need, and so we need to protect the same way that we want to protect the terrestrial environment from degradation. We need to protect the orbital environment because it is such an integral part of our daily lives. So to solve that issue that's so important to all of us, you mentioned the technology, Sarah. It's a three issue problem. It's like a Venn diagram of issues, right? So one big circle is the technology. Mm-hmm. You need to solve that technology problem. Then the second one is the policy. How do we address these policy issues in an area that's fairly unregulated? And the third one is the business case. How do we find money to pay for this? How do we find customers to pay for it? So you asked about the technology, and I can talk about that a little bit first. But really, all three of those problems are interrelated. And we could have the greatest technology ever and find the way to solve it from a technical perspective. But if we don't address the policy issues and the business case issues, it's not going to work.
All right.
And that's the same with the other two areas. We can look at the policy and focus on that. But if we don't look at the other two, it's not going to work. And really, that's what a lot of people have been doing with space debris, is looking at just the policy. And there was some technology development, but no one was looking at that third circle, that business case. And that's what we're doing.
Okay.
So it's not really answering your question.
That's okay. We can do this in 3 parts.
I can get to your question, but that was more of a broad overview of what we're doing.
Cool. All right. So technology, you're working on that, addressing it in a way that other people haven't. But the business side, I guess I'm kind of intrigued by that. So would you be able, once you get the technology and the policy addressed, would you be able to reuse the space junk? Would you be able to transform it into some way, make it into a profitable business by building things on orbit?
So that's the dream, right? That's that next step is to be able to pick it up, bring it back to some recycling facility, and repurpose it. Recycle the materials that are on there for future use. At this point in time, we're not there. So right now, on the technology side, we're in the middle of designing and developing our technology demonstration mission called ELSA-D. end of life services by Astroscale demonstration. So we're working on that right now, ELSA-D, and hoping to launch in the next 18 months or so. Yeah, there's an image of it right now. So we're working on building that. I have also a 1/6 scale model as well here when it comes back to me. But so we're working on developing ELSA-D right now. And ELSA-D is going to launch with, this is the chaser satellite, our ELSA satellite. It's going to have a small target on the end of it. Mm-hmm. And when it gets up into orbit, it's going to separate 3 different times. So first time it'll separate and it'll stay stable, and then it'll come together, find it, and attach. Okay. And then the second time it'll separate and the target will tumble, and then it'll come and it'll synchronize its motion. And then stabilize. And then the third time it'll separate and it will go farther away, so it'll get lost. And so the chaser will find the target, attach to it. And then after all these demonstrations, and burn up in the atmosphere. We'll bring it down, reorbit it, and burn it up. So that's how we're working on this technology to develop it. Right now, we're not at that point that you're talking about where we could bring it back to another space station or something and repurpose the materials on board. But Space Mike and I were talking about that earlier mm-hmm. before we started, and that's something he wants to do too. So maybe we'll have to talk in the future with Space Mike about his potential venture.
All right. So your satellite had to bring its own test junk with it. Is that going back to that policy issue you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, well, so that's a bit easier, right? Because we don't have to talk to a third party initially to do our test demonstration, our technology demonstration. Mm-hmm. What we are looking at, though, is additional mission lines where we can test it with a satellite that's already in orbit. And so we're talking to some of these, the large constellations that are going to be launching about wanting to do some kind of test when they get their satellites in orbit, where we can attach to them and prove this capability that we can attach to and deorbit. But for the near term, yeah, it makes sense that we just bring our own up with us so we don't worry about the policy. ELSA-D is primarily our way to test the technology. Now, as we go through with ELSA-D, we're also involved in lots of policy conversations. We're also talking to lots of potential customers. So we're covering both, but really ELSA-D is our test of our technology. And then on the side, we're doing the policy and the business case side too.
And so you mentioned that you were kind of looking at this as space conservation, like we've got an ocean cleanup here in Los Angeles this morning. So you would be kind of doing that. Would you be approaching other governments as if this is a protect our environment, our space environment kind of situation? And how do you go about selling that as a profitable business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one we talk about all the time. So we're really looking at 2 different business cases, Sarah. We're looking at, one is called end of life services. Right. And basically that means don't add any more trash to space. That's one line. So let's start there, right? Let's not increase the amount of trash that's already up there. So that's our end of life services. The second one is our active debris removal. And that means going up and grabbing the debris that's already up there and bringing it back down. Now the image you just showed there, that's it's not that bad. It's not like we're playing a game of Frogger to like leap past every piece of debris in space. Space is still big, but it could get to that point. And so that's our concern, to try to focus on both of these issues. Focus on don't add any more debris and bring the debris down. So for the first one, we're talking to commercial companies, primarily companies that are planning to launch tens, hundreds, potentially thousands of satellites into the same orbit, and telling them, hey, before you launch, put a deorbit mechanism on your satellite so that a third party can come up and grab it and bring it down. It's the same way that a car has a hitch on the back, right? So if it fails going up, Highway 1, the Pacific Coast Highway in California, a truck could come, AAA could come and attach to it and take it out of commission. So what we're proposing is to have something like that attached to all satellites that launch so that we can go up and take it out of commission if it fails. So that's the one side. That's the end of life services where we're focused on the commercial companies. Your question, Sarah, was about the getting governments to buy into the environmental cleanup aspect of it. And yeah, we're talking to governments. You know, it was governments that put up most of the stuff that's trash now. They're the ones who were responsible for putting it up there. So, you know, they should be responsible for bringing it down. So we're talking to them about missions that would go and remove some of the really big pieces. Because there's some huge pieces, like size of a city bus type pieces that are up there. And obviously, the larger the piece, the more possibility that it could hit an act. And if that happens, then potentiality for further debris. And so we are talking to a lot of governments in creative ways to fund missions that would go up there and bring down some of these old pieces of debris. So we're looking at both business lines, talking both to the commercial companies and talking to the governments to try to find a way to not add any more debris and bring down the debris that's already there.
All right. Very cool. Okay. So with the space junk that's not government made, that is in private industry, that is already up there, is that policy, I guess, what is the space environment policy like right now? What kind of upward battle are you fighting? What are the rules against you just going up there and starting a clean sweep right now?
So when somebody launches a satellite, it's basically theirs until it comes back down and deorbits. So having to get that permission, it can be difficult, and it's difficult to get from the commercial companies, and even more difficult to get from the governments. And so it's tough to find that permission. There's also security issues. Obviously, if we're creating a satellite that can find and attach to another satellite, some countries get worried that it could be used for not peaceful purposes. We are fully using ours for peaceful purposes. We're only there to clean up the environment. But we have to discuss this with governments, and we have to address this issue. And so that's one of the other policy things that we're having to focus on. And the space area is pretty much unregulated. Some people call it global commons, but it's, you know, that's different people use different words. But really, it's an area that there isn't a jurisdiction. There's not an orbital traffic cop that's sitting up there and prepared to, you know, fine people for leaving trash on the highway. And so we need to work with a consortium of groups, from the UN to World Economic Industry.
So we're losing you. We lost you a little bit in there. Could you repeat that?
Insurance company.
We lost you a little bit in there. Could you repeat that last section?
Sorry. Yeah, I just say we're talking to a lot of different groups. We have to pull together basically an international consortium of interested parties from the United Nations, from a variety of the countries that launched these satellites and rockets in the past. Usually, you know, Europe, U.S., China, Russia, Japan. Talking to all of those countries to think about the best way to bring things down and to do future licensing, and then talking to all these international groups. So that is all about the policy issue of those three main concerns that I talked about.
Right.
So yeah, it's challenging on every level. But we think what we see is a trend toward acceptance by the governments that this is an issue. This issue of environmental sustainability. It's a real concern, just like it is down here. People are concerned with the environment in orbit. And so governments are starting to buy into it. They're starting to develop policies and assign budgets to potential missions where they would go and bring down some of their defunct satellites or their old rocket bodies. But we're also seeing it from the commercial side. The commercial companies recognize that we're on the cusp of basically a new space age. There's a democratization of space. So they recognize that the orbital environment is only going to get more crowded. And while many of those satellites obviously are providing a benefit when they fail in orbit and they're not able to be deorbited, they are a threat. And so companies want to bring those down from a business continuity perspective. So companies recognize that this is their revenue stream. This orbital highway is their revenue stream. So they're going to want to bring these pieces of debris down to maintain business continuity. Governments recognize that it's an environmental issue, so they want to bring these satellites down to maintain environmental sustainability. So on both of these issues is where we're focused right now.
All right. I'm really relieved to hear that people, countries and companies alike are so receptive to the concept of conservation before it becomes an issue. That's amazing.
Yeah,
actually.
it is. And you're surprised that is warranted, because it is tough. It's always hard to look at a future problem, right?
Yes.
There's enough current problems that people say, why are we looking at this future problem? And it happens here all the time. We see it in environmental issues on Earth all the time. Yeah. So the argument continues to be an uphill battle, Sarah. I mean, it's not an easy one, but when we're explaining the high risk, or I'd say the high impact of an impact of it, of a impacting another satellite. Yeah. What could happen with that is each impact that happens could create thousands of more pieces of debris, which has the potential to have thousands of more impacts.
Right.
And what it could lead to is something called the Kessler syndrome, which was postulated by a NASA scientist in the late 70s, actually, who said, as more and more satellites get into orbit, you're going to reach a tipping point where if there's an accident, there's going to become a cascading level of debris. Right. And debris will just increase to the point where we can't use the orbits anymore. And so we need to address that problem before it happens. And that's what.
Okay. Well, at the moment, so are there any, so we've got a question from the chat room. Space Tara wants to know, are there any laws or taxes right now governing satellite operators? Is there anything that is in place at the moment to either help you guys get going or hold operators accountable?
So, right, basically accept the satellite.
So we lost you at the very beginning there. Could you repeat that first section?
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So so I'd say there's a basically accepted principle that if a company or a country launches a satellite, it comes back down and deorbit within 25 years. This interagency debris coordination committee, basically a collection of space agencies from around the world, has put forward this concept, which has been accepted by operators, government and commercial operators. And so what satellite operators will do is they'll make sure that when their satellite has finished its useful end of life, it will have enough fuel to push itself down into if it's in low Earth orbit, which is below about 2,000 kilometers, it'll push itself down into a lower orbit where it will burn up quickly in the atmosphere. If it's in a high orbit, a geo orbit, 30,000 or so kilometers, it will go up to what's called a graveyard orbit. It'll move up a little bit, so it'll kind of get out of the way of the rest of the satellite. So there are those kind of laws in place, or those accepted norms in place. What happens though at certain orbits? So at about 800 to 1,000 or so kilometers up in low Earth orbit, if a satellite fails, it's not going to naturally degrade for centuries, probably 1,000 years. And so it's up there for generations, millennia potentially. And so bringing that down is really important, because that's just a constant threat. If it's at a low orbit, like the space station is at about 400 kilometers. And if the space station wasn't boosted, the space station always uses propulsion to boost itself up. If it wasn't boosted, it would come down within a year or so. It would come down fairly quickly. And so the satellite operators at a low Earth orbits basically can come down within that 25-year rule just on its own, just naturally, even if their satellite fails.
Right.
Where we're concerned is if it fails in that higher orbits, up to about 800 to 1,200 kilometers up, it's not going to be coming down anytime soon.
Got it.
And so that's in terms of following regulations, that's what companies generally do. As far as a tax, there really isn't anything right now. There isn't a pool that people put into before they launch, and that's says, here's the money. If I bring it down, I'll get my money back. If I don't, then use this money to go and bring down a piece of debris. But that's one of the concepts that we're roughly talking about right now as we think about the business case of this.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got another question from the chat room. Trebles wants to know, what's the largest piece of debris ELSA-D can grapple and deorbit at the moment with the technology you've got it today?
So the piece of debris that ELSA-D will grab, our demonstration mission, is fairly small, 15 to 20 kilograms. It's going to be a small piece that we're testing.
Okay.
So we're testing the rendezvous and docking technologies is what we're really doing. How big that we can grab, we're thinking that we're going to be able to grab between 150 to 400 kilogram piece of debris. We're talking about how that would be, but a lot of the satellites that are launching with these large constellations that are going to be going up over the next 5 years or so, they're in about that range, 150 to 400 kilograms. And so we're focused to our technology on being able to attach and reorbit satellites of about that size. As we think about bringing down some of these 2 or ton Funk satellites or rocket bodies, we need to rethink about scaling up the bus capability of future ELSAs or ADR, active debris removal missions. We need to think about scaling that up a little bit more. But right now, focused on about 150 to 400 kilograms or so.
Okay. So you, I think I caught you saying reorbit as well as deorbit. So you're not just going to be a remove debris, but you might also be kind of the space mechanics, putting the craft back in the orbit it was supposed to be if something goes wrong with its propulsion system?
So what you're referring to there probably is in-orbit servicing a bit more, and that's not what we're doing. I use those terms, and I probably shouldn't do it. That gets confusing. I apologize. When I'm saying deorbit, I'm saying bring it all the way down.
Oh, I thought you said
all the
reorbit.
way.
Sorry, with an
deorbit. Bring it all the way down into the atmosphere, so then it burns up in the atmosphere. Reorbit would be bringing it down to a low enough orbit that within a month or 2 or a few months, it would deorbit on itself. So it's a bit of a technicality, and so it's a bit confusing. But really, in this case, I'm meaning bringing it down so that it will burn up in the atmosphere soon.
All right.
Is our goal. But the in-orbit servicing side is a big deal as well. People are talking about, and companies are looking at doing in-orbit servicing also, where doing what you're referencing there, Sarah, which is attaching to and then fixing a satellite or putting more fuel in it. That is another potential business that's out there. Ours, what we're focused on is a reliable, low-cost solution to removing the debris first. Long term, there may be some other opportunities for in-orbit servicing as well, but those satellites are by definition going to be larger, more expensive, more capable. We're looking at a targeted service to go up and grab that debris and get it out of the way so it doesn't hurt anything else.
Awesome. Okay, and we've got another question from the chat room. Hanny's Vorwerp wants to know, is there enough debris out there for a long-term business model?
Unfortunately, yeah. Well, fortunately for us, but unfortunately for the environment. So there's enough up there in terms of large debris already that we would need to go up and remove a couple pieces of a year over the next several decades to make sure that we sustain have a sustainable orbit, that we keep it at a level where we're not risking having a high risk of a collision, which could lead to that Kessler effect. What is changing the economics of this business, though, is this, I mentioned earlier, democratization of space. All of these
sorry, we lost you there.
Launch vehicle.
Sorry, could you repeit that first? Right. That first chunk
wait
again.
Wait a second. Sure. Am I back?
You're right.
Am I back? Yeah. What's changing the economics of this business is that all of these companies that are now going to be launching small satellites, all of these launch vehicle companies that are offering new on-demand launch vehicle service. There's so many out there, dozens out there that are going to be offering launch services on demand, both small launch vehicles and larger ones that are going to be launching, tens to hundreds of satellites. so many out there right now, and so many companies and institutions that are building satellites now. The cost of developing a satellite or building a launch vehicle has gotten so much less expensive that more and more people are doing it. And the more and more people do it, the more we're relying on these satellites as well to get Earth images and understand the climate. As we get into issues like IoT and self-driving cars, we're going to need it even more. We're going to need constant connectivity. And so there's all of these satellites that are going to be launched in the future. So it's not just what's currently up there. Is that able to sustain a business, as the person asked on the chat room, but it's what's coming in the near term. And so it's a combination of what's up there now, along with what's coming, which really makes this a sustainable business for us.
Awesome. All right. So my last question for you is, where can people find out more about your company? Is Astroscale hiring if we want to get involved in cleaning up the space environment? What can we do?
We are always looking for more space sweepers. So everybody, so both as a hiring and just as a supporter, right? We want more people to understand what a concern this is and what we're doing to try to solve it. So you can find out more. We have a website, astroscale.com. We have is all out there. We have a website, Astroscale.
Yep,
I
awesome.
think I have to pick up again. All right, astroscale.com. We have a Twitter handle at Astroscale, Facebook page. So all of that information is out there. If people are going to conferences, we'll be at the International Astronautical Congress in Germany. We're always out there. So if people are interested, we're always out there available to talk. We're growing. We think that there's going to be business out there at a variety of levels. So if people are interested, certainly they should get in touch with us as we try to continue to grow this company. And yeah, we're always looking for good people good engineers, good people to talk about the business, to work on the business. So yeah, we're always open and also just open for more supporters. So come join, be a space sweeper.
All right, you got me sold. So I've got a couple questions, the standard questions that we ask all of our guests. So, all right, what is your favorite space mission, past, present, or future?
Well, my future favorite space mission obviously is Elsa D. Right, so I think I can answer that question, right?
All right.
Let me just go on this. So I guess future, JW, James Webb Space Telescope, is going to be awesome. When I worked with NASA, obviously Hubble was such a cool mission, and we talked about Hubble all the time.
Yeah.
But JW is just going to be so much more capable and so much bigger. And what we're going to learn about the universe from a satellite that's way out at the Lagrange point and so much bigger, it's just going to be awesome. So I can't wait to see what JW does. But as I start talking about this, I can't name one, so I should just stop her because there's going to be too many more. All
right. Okay, so next one is human or robot exploration of the cosmos?
Both.
Yes.
Sorry to split it in half, but it's got to be both. I mean, so it's again, 14 years at NASA, this was a common question, and I know people sometimes split into two sides, but you're not going to be able to really.
Sorry, we lost you again there.
Robotic missions. Sorry. So you need the robotic missions. Obviously, the lower cost, lower risk to human life. Obviously, those are necessary.
Yeah.
But the human missions are incredible.
Yeah.
And I'd have these conversations with people who sided on the robotic side, and I said, so the next time a human lands on the moon, you're just not going to watch. You're not going to care about the human landing on the moon again. And obviously, they're going to. I mean, the excitement of having people doing this stuff can't be measured. So both. Sorry.
I like it. Awesome. And where should we go next? We're sending people and robots. Where to next?
Well, after we clean up space, of course. So first we'll settle on that. And then after that, because we're going to need to clean up space as well to get to these places. If as the orbits become more congested, we're going to need to get through there. So to get to the moon, to get to Mars, that's a tough question. The moon is the easier option. It's obviously closer. We've been there. one. If we're talking about humans, I'd say the moon would be the next exciting step. I'd like to see that happen. So it'd be nice to watch another person step foot on the moon, and to see someone that's not a man step foot on the moon, or an American man would be great too. To see a woman there.
Lucky 13.
Or other countries.
And finally, why space?
We can't not stop exploring. It is so exciting, and not just the exploration, but the utility. So the exploration, the inspiration of space, again, it can't be measured. And we got from Apollo and the space era of the 60s is basically fully informed where we are today. The people that were inspired by those missions are the ones that are currently changing the world, or have been changing the world from a technology perspective over the last 20 years. That inspiration, that excitement of space, it's just so exciting, and it can't be measured. So I don't think we could stop as humanity with the exploration and utilization. So it's not just the exploration; it's the utilization. We're using space every day, and so we can't not be there.
I like it. All right. Thank you so much for talking with us today. This is, I'm so excited for cleaning up space.
Great, Sarah. I look forward to talking more. Anytime you have questions, let me know.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Chris Blackerby from Astroscale. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much.
So now we get to thank not just Chris, but also our Escape Velocity citizens. These people have donated $10 an episode to help us bring you tomorrow. All right, and when we come back, we will have questions and comments from last week's show.
Science. It both draws us together and tears us apart. Brings discoveries to cure us and threaten us. It is neither good nor evil. It is what we decide to make of it. There is so much more to learn, and we are curious. Together, let's explore the science of tomorrow.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. And now we're in the final segment of 11.36, where we take your comments from last week's show and we discuss them and we talk about them a little bit. And last week's show, we had Mike Lewis, the COO of NanoRacks. And oh boy, that was a really cool interview.
That was awesome.
Because there's just so much that came down through that interview. And to kind of talk about that a little bit, our first comment comes from Michael Brown on YouTube, and it says, "Great interview. I had no idea NanoRacks had done so many payloads."
I think NanoRacks are doing such amazing stuff.
Holy
like Mike
moly.
was talking about how, like, they don't have to just fly science experiments. They can fly like things that you want to take up. So, you know, whether that's a collectible item and then you give it out for educational purposes, or like a bag of like plant seeds, tomato seeds, and you take it up with NanoRacks and you bring it back down, and then you give it out to schools and they can run their own experiments.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And but then they also have like the hard science stuff. So they have like an experiment that they'll go through with NanoRacks and sit down with, you know, like a mission manager and work out what are all the things that could go wrong with this experiment, and how can we like put it in a, you know, a Ziploc bag within a Ziploc bag within a Ziploc bag, so if anything spills, nothing is going to spill on the space station. Like, that is just, they're enabling so many science experiments to get to space, and that's like something really close to my heart. Like, enabling people to learn more about the world that we live in, which is pretty cool.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, and I love that they're not just enabling getting other people's hardware into space, they're actually putting their own hardware into space, like the CubeSat deployer and their eventual airlock that they're working on as well, which we talked about a little bit in that interview last week. So if you guys want to know more about that, definitely go back on there and take a listen. So it was a really interesting episode with that. So On to our second comment from Peter Arnold, also on YouTube, which is great episode, guys. Very interesting interview to watch. Just one suggestion when explaining the set of 5 standard questions at the end of the interview to the guest. You might want to say to them that they are very broad questions and your answer is just your opinion, as well as telling them the usual thing that there are no right or wrong answers. Well, a little bit of a development.
Yeah, we're changing it up. We're changing it up.
Yeah.
So the plan is to kind of move towards. There's 2 options, right? We haven't really decided because Ben always changes his mind on things.
Yes.
But one is to take away with the 4 questions, just use the why space question because I think it's the one that everyone kind of enjoys asking the most. I don't know about you, like out of those 4 questions, which one you like the most? But
I do like what spacecraft. I think we get a more diverse answer to what's your favorite mission.
Yeah.
Because someone came up with a specific shuttle mission once, and that was out of nowhere, and I loved that. And her reason, it was close to her heart that one launch had made an impact on her, and I like that as well.
It's cool when you give people the opportunity to say something very specific like that. So we want to take that as well as like the whole premise of learning more about the guest and combine it into like a space lightning question round.
Yes.
Kind of what we're going
Space
for.
interrogation.
Cool.
Yeah.
Space interrogation.
Space interrogation, I feel like that's
Space
a little
Mike
bit too
said,
hard
so.
of it. So you'll see us changing that and mixing it up, and maybe next week or the week after we might do our first demo for it, probably in After Dark. So, check out After Dark. You can find it on YouTube, or if you want early access to After Dark, you can also support us as a patron. Shameless plug.
Yes. Yes, and I do like our chat room's kind of reacting to some of these things. Sir Gamelot says that 5 questions are better. I mean, 3 questions are better. And then Prismara is saying, ask me the questions, Bridgekeeper, I'm not afraid. So, excellent stuff.
Just ask me the velocity of a swallow.
Yeah, Melon Yusk is saying, change it to 20 questions with correct answers. Under 15 correct leads to a terrible fate.
Oh my goodness, what is this turning into?
Now, Sir Gamelot is literally quoting Monty Python and the Holy Grail, word for word, in the chat room, so...
Okay, what about if we what questions, and we're thinking like short, snappy answers, right? Like, what was your favorite mission? Do you like Coke or Pepsi better? Like, it doesn't have to be space related.
Yeah.
Right.
Leave come up with a question that you kind of quirky, maybe space related, but short and snappy that you might want to know about our guest. It has to be appropriate. We'll moderate them accordingly, but leave it as a comment or on the community forums, community.tmro.tv. And maybe your question will get included in our list.
Yeah, would be super, super cool. And we're going to go ahead and go to our last comment of the previous episode that we're going to look at, which is from JackSpeed493 on YouTube, which is asteroid mining. Going to need to change the space law. Current law is that no one can own anything in space. So that actually kind of leads a little bit, pretty cool, to our show that we're actually going to be having
Space Mike, aren't you doing the interview next week?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yes.
And next week, we're going to be talking to Chris Johnson, who's a space law advisor at the Secure World Foundation. He's also an adjunct professor of law at Georgetown University, or rather Georgetown Law. So he's going to be a really great resource to talk about what the actual legalities are of this and how it kind of varies from country to country.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so interesting to me is that right now there is no globally accepted standards as to what the legality of things are, which leads to some cool political intrigue and other
you have
things.
Like the Outer Space Treaty and stuff, but all of these things, Outer Space Treaty, Moon Agreement, the Astronaut Safety Return Agreement, probably got that name wrong because it's law.
Something like that.
They're all signed in the 60s and 70s. Where is the space law for the 21st century?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that next week, and I'm super looking forward to that because that's something that gets thrown around a lot here on the show, but we've never actually, I don't know if we've ever actually had an expert come on and talk about it.
I think in Orbit 8.
Yeah, maybe.
Been a
So
while.
an expert with that. Yeah, thank you. Oh, no, 2, what was that? Oh, we've had 2. Okay.
Oh, hey.
Gotcha. So not an expert, it's just we've had 2. All right, very, very good. As I'm wrapping this up beautifully.
One question I do want to learn from the space lawyer is we always have this argument with our launch calendar, like how we keep track of the different countries that are winning, right? How do you define which country you should give that particular launch to. Like, does it go, like, if it's a Soyuz rocket, is it a Russian launch? Or because the Europeans bought that launch and it launched from French Guiana, is that like a French launch or European launch? Like, I want the definitive answer so that we can get our tally right, so we can see who wins the bet between Mike and Ben.
Yeah. So, so it turns out for the United States, it'll actually be Florida launches and California launches. So nobody wins. All right, and to go ahead and wrap up our show.
Wallops?
Oh yeah, wallops. I'm sorry, Delaware.
Virginia?
Virginia.
Or is it Delaware?
No, it's Virginia.
I don't know.
It's Delmarva.
I think.
It's just another part of the world that I have happened to have. Yeah, it's just another part of the world that I happen to have insulted on this show. All right,
The Tri-State Peninsula.
Wrapping up the show, we want to thank our escape velocity citizens. These folks give us $10 per episode or more. We also have our orbital citizens. You give us $5 to $9.99 per episode. Also, our suborbital citizens, you give us anywhere from $2.50 to $4.99 per episode. As a stall for time, $4.99. That is 499 pennies. Have you found your name yet? Awesome. And our ground support citizens as well. They give us anywhere from $1 to $2.49 per episode. And do not be mistaken, any support that we can get from you is fantastic. We are appreciative of it. You do not even have to financially support us. You can come on to our community at community.tomorrow.tv. If you have the ability to code, if you have the ability to read things, if you just have an ability that you think would be helpful to tomorrow, we are more than happy for you to come on the show, come on and help us out and make this show even better. And if you would like to help out the show of tomorrow, you can head on over to patreon.com/TMRO or go over to community.tmro.tv where we have awesome discussions all the time. It's fun. So I really enjoy it. Yeah, it's worth it. So, all right. So that is it for 11.36. We hope that you have a very nice week and we'll see you around.
Bye.